Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And I'm Robert Winters, and it's February 15th,
I know.
2022.
I know.
The Ides of February. Actually, I think the Ides are maybe the 13th of a 28
Oh,
day.
really? I didn't even know they had
Yeah,
any for.
it's different.
Okay.
Like Ides of March is because it's a 31-day month.
But
So it
also
might be
something else. Yeah, whatever.
is the
So
onus and the Ides. I forget.
whatever.
It's all Latin to me.
Speaking of, all right, this is off topic, but I notice you always tweet your Wordle squares.
It's because
Robert.
I'm really hopelessly bored, and yeah, no, I no,
I mean, I don't know.
it's a
I don't know
uniform.
how you do that. I don't know how to get that blank
Oh, I'll
thing.
show
I
you how to
haven't
do it.
been able to.
But
All right, because I've been
it is
doing it.
I'm sure it's going to be a very, very quick passing fad. But
Yeah,
in a way,
I get
I think
bored
of it
with it.
as
I know.
the way I described it to people. I said, in a world where everybody's worried about Ukraine and Trump flushing things down toilets
Yeah.
and pandemics and whatever, we all decided to like spontaneously to
Yeah.
sort of gather around the Wordle water cooler,
Yeah.
just do something pointless and silly, and
Yeah.
it won't last. But in the short
Well, there's
term,
others variations. I guess there's abwordle or
oh, well,
absurdle or
I'm sure
something.
there'll be others like this as well.
There,
So
yeah.
yeah, so
It's sort of fun.
I confess I've been doing it,
Yeah.
anyway, so no need to
Okay.
get into my
Good.
strategies. All right.
Oh, I have a strategy. Yeah, but I my most popular. I've done it about 16 times, and I probably mostly fours. I've gotten a few threes, two twos. I think my very first one was a 2, so that was just pure luck because I didn't even have a strategy then. But
All
anyway,
right.
okay.
All right. So
Enough
we in the last half hour we talked a bit about the
parking.
proposal to eliminate parking minimums,
Mhm.
right? Which is an
Except for
initiative
affordable housing, is that right?
which I believe they are already
But they're also
exempt under the AHO. And
right,
there has been some time, there has been relaxed requirements. The closer you were to public transit, the more
right,
possible you could simply be made. You could have reduced requirements or be completely exempt, if you were close to public transit. So that was part of the whole concept of transit-oriented development. But the further from transit you are, it has usually been the belief that, well, maybe you should be providing some parking on site if you're going to be doing at least a larger development, right?
well, but okay,
Right. Well, anyway, that's been the sort of the policy for
sure,
some time,
yeah,
and so this would be a change to that, so that even if you were not near transit, this
mhm,
proposal would say you do not need to provide any parking. So, though you might choose to do so anyway. But where that goes, I don't know. I imagine there'll be at least a reduction in the requirement, if not an elimination. I think we're heading in that direction.
yeah,
But it is interesting too, though, that those requirements are coupled with, not to get into the controversy of bike lanes and bus lanes
mm,
and all of that, but also allocation of on-street spaces to parking. If you say you don't have to do it on site, but then you start also removing the on-street parking as well,
yeah,
and which will affect things very unevenly. There are some neighborhoods where it's already tight, where it'll, really kind of be a real whack, in other places where it's like no big deal.
mm,
Right. I mean, I haven't ever seen any like back to back to back to back parking along Brattle Street, for example.
right,
So, no big deal. Right. But anyway, those are some of the changes that are sort of happening here. But another thing that nobody's been talking about lately, but I'm sure they will soon enough.
yeah.
Remember a few years ago, people were talking about proposals for car sharing, you know,
Well, when you say car sharing, oh yeah, okay, go ahead.
right. So
Yeah,
there were proposals. I think there may have even been a zoning proposal to permit people to kind of co-own, you own a car and then many people in the community do it, but it's parked on somebody's property.
okay. I
There were
don't
even,
actually remember a proposal, but yeah,
yeah, there were also some proposals for allowing things like zip cars to be
oh well,
parked
that
on private property, but then you'd have people from wherever either coming in and dropping off cars day or night, whatever.
Like
And then some,
Airbnb, yeah, people that
yeah,
like that,
so
yeah,
just like with Airbnb, then there was
yeah.
some concerns
Oh, right,
that
okay,
might
you're
actually
right,
become disruptive.
right,
There's also been a practice in Cambridge,
yeah,
not technically legal,
yeah.
of people to rent out the parking spaces that they do have on their property.
It's not, what do you mean it's not technically legal? I know people who do that.
Then,
Well, wait, but what if it's an absentee owner? What if it's a management company? They can't rent out the space. Really? Oh, okay. Didn't know
keep it
that.
under your hat.
All right. I don't know
Technically,
any of them personally, so.
technically, according to the city regulations, I believe you are operating a commercial enterprise
Huh.
then if you're accepting money for it. It'd be one thing if you let your neighbors just park on your
Right,
driveway, but
right,
the
right, right.
moment
I see what you're saying.
there's a transaction, then, and I believe this was all sort of wrapped up into the vehicle trip reduction ordinance and all of that, they didn't want to have a situation where people were commuting into Cambridge,
Oh,
parking
right,
their
that's true.
car on somebody's private property and then walking to the subway to go into Boston or something like that. So that's really where I believe that's where the root of
But do you
those
remember though,
regulations.
the Pats games that all those people that lived around, wherever that is, rented out their spaces? They overlooked that, I guess, because people made a lot of money on football, on game
In the
days.
true spirit of the sports analogy, as they
Yeah,
say, no
yeah,
whistle, no foul.
yeah, I think that
Okay,
was all
so
allowed, yeah.
right, so just because something is illegal doesn't mean people will fail to do it.
Exactly,
And it's
exactly.
also a big difference between an exceptional thing,
Mhm.
sort of like, okay, it's, if the Super Bowl was taking place at, here or something like that. But, it's as opposed to an everyday commuter
Well,
type
this
of
was,
reality.
right, okay, so
Right.
you're saying that never got off the ground, that
No,
never
no.
got.
So technically it's something you're not supposed to be doing. We do have people I've seen around where I live where, especially if the
Mhm.
parking in a, well, there's a couple of things. If somebody has a larger building and they've got an underground parking garage and it
Yeah,
costs $150 a month to park your car there, but you
right,
could opt out, then maybe you could rent your space to somebody else. But once again, technically illegal, I believe. And but there are other people who choose to park on the street and then rent out the space on their lot,
wow.
which is, that's a little bit of a problem for those of us who need to park on the street too.
Well, that's
So
what people under rent control were doing with their rent control units while they lived in Lincoln or somewhere.
yes, that's true.
So,
That's true. We all like to bend a
yeah,
rule here and there.
I
But
know,
but
okay,
anyway, the reason why I was just bringing it up here right now is that I ran
yeah.
into Craig Kelly
Yay,
on
Craig,
Inman Street. And
we
after I
miss him,
joked
yeah.
right next to City Hall, I
Hey, what are
accused
you
him of
doing
recidivism for coming back to City Hall.
here?
But he says, no, 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 I filed a zoning petition. And I'll just give the quick down and dirty version of it. I could also flash it up for people here.
Well, it isn't public, I mean, they haven't
It's not, it
filed.
doesn't matter. Well, it's public because it's been filed.
Well,
So
he
it's already a
submitted it,
public record,
yeah,
So I think maybe I'll just sort of flash it here
yeah,
as we speak to it here, but basically it's got a fancy name, Cambridge
yeah,
Transportation Carbonization and Congestion Mitigation Bill.
oh,
We all
boy,
laughed a little bit about that.
yeah,
But basically the two aspects of it here has to do with whether you should permit people to use on-site residential use for existing parking spaces for car shares, to share a vehicle, and also for the possibility, if you have the capacity to do electric vehicle charging, to allow for electric vehicle charging to take place. And what he would like to do would be basically for all the residential zones across the city to make sharing of a car and electric vehicle charging on site possible.
so there's no monetary,
There, I
reference
presume
here
there
at all.
would be some remuneration. Certainly, if you're going to plug in a car to get electric charge, there'd have to be some way of conducting a
But then that's
transaction.
going against what you're saying the rules are about charging, be a
Well,
commercial
but
enterprise.
this is a zoning petition which changes the rules.
But why does he call it a bill? instead of a
It just
petition?
felt like calling it a bill, I guess,
Oh,
maybe
well,
as
to me,
aspirations for running for Congress. I don't know. But
well, it's either a petition or it's legislation.
yeah,
I guess.
I don't have strong feelings one way or another, but there's obviously going to be people who are going to object to the idea, just like they object to Airbnbs
Right,
operating
we don't want all
in
these cars coming on.
people
Yeah.
coming and going, and effectively, I mean, let's to be perfectly ridiculous. If electric vehicle charging is the future equivalent of today's gas stations, do you want everybody to be able to operate a gas station on the all up and down every block of the city, right? I mean, that's kind of unfair, but basically that would be a commercial enterprise effectively, unless they were so commonplace that really it was only the neighbors on the block that were sharing the electric charging system. I
Just
mean,
need more, yeah. Go ahead.
well, one thing right now is that I don't know what the percentage of motor vehicles in the city are that are electric vehicles now, but we all know where there are some places to charge them, either some people at home,
Yeah,
some places alongside City Hall, a few parking lots here and there, but it's not like there's a
Porter
widespread
Square,
availability.
there's a couple, there's
Right, but that's up, but we're not talking about a lot.
no,
And
no, one or two at the
right,
most.
I think there's some plans to turn some light poles or maybe parking meter spaces to
Mhm.
have them do double duty as charging stations. There are places I've seen on Cambridge Street in Boston where they have some.
Yeah.
So
No,
there
they
will be
definitely can do it. It's just, yeah,
right. But so I don't know what the future holds here,
yeah.
and whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, or whether it's acceptable to people or not. But I bring it up only because I think it's a conversation that's going to have to happen sooner or later. So I
Yeah.
don't think it's a bad conversation to get started now, and where
No,
it
but
goes, who
yeah,
knows? I mean, like a lot of zoning petition ideas, they don't go through on the first pass, a lot of them anyway.
no,
So there may be variations of the theme, and maybe certain circumstances under which it's possible, like if the lot was a certain size and you had
yeah.
at least 35 feet from the nearest neighbor or something like that. I don't know. But I appreciate the fact that it's being thrown into the fray, even if it goes down in flames, but I think it's a good conversation that's inevitably going to have to happen. There will come a day that people like me with gasoline powered cars will become the dinosaurs, you know.
I think that's going to be a long time coming.
I don't know about how long away, but because more and
Well,
more
I don't
motor
think gas
vehicles.
is going away, and I think, well, let's see, 2035, you won't be able to buy a gas-powered vehicle. But
Well,
that's,
right,
all right,
but
so that's
right,
13. Okay, but most people keep their cars. My car is 7 years old.
a lot of
The
people
car
sell
you
them
own is at
pretty
least,
quick, yeah.
yeah,
But anyway, I think that the conversation is something that's going to have to happen,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and it's kind of nice to sort of see some
Something
creativity
that's,
bubbling up, even if it's
yeah,
something that will not survive in the
right,
current form. We'll see.
yeah,
Anyway, I
yeah,
thought it
yeah,
was interesting.
yeah,
Now, on a
okay,
completely different matter, there's
okay,
this, we are in this rather unprecedented period where we have a city council that is simultaneously trying to hire all three of the positions that it
mhm.
hires.
That
Uh,
they are,
yeah, a city manager, a city clerk, and a city auditor.
yeah,
Uh, and possibly with a little bit of redefinition of the job description for maybe auditor, maybe even clerk, I don't know. Um, and tomorrow night, I believe, there's the first public session for
public,
people to give
yes, six
input
o'clock.
on. There have already been focus groups of various kinds put together.
And I guess that the results of those are available somewhere, or they
Yeah,
will
and
be. That's why I
I'll
read
have
that.
to look them up. I haven't
Too.
been following it closely.
If
I,
you find it, you should post it on your
I
site.
will. I will. I've been a little cynical about this whole
Yeah,
process.
I think it's like
I,
so over the top. It's ridiculous to me. But
if this is a process where there are 9 city councilors don't really know how to do this, even those who have been through it technically in the past, but not really doing it in the past.
oh,
Now, and
okay,
I think there are some potential um, pitfalls in this process. It's one thing to say we're gathering input, but if the focus groups are a little too focused. I mean, in other words, you've already
Yeah.
decided the outcomes.
Well,
And then there's this,
I think I said this in an email to you, is that, are they gonna start these big public meetings with an explanation of what is a city manager and what's our plan of government and why we have it? Because I don't think people even know this stuff.
I
They
absolutely agree
equate the
with
city
you.
manager with being like a mayor or something, and it isn't. It's different. And
I
I just
actually,
think that we need that education.
I saw, well, I'll give you
Yes.
a fine example of that. I saw one
Yeah.
email blast that went out from one of the primary political organizations a
Yeah.
year or two ago,
Oh,
saying
about,
how we need to get an activist manager who's going to be focusing on this
oh,
issue and that issue.
I
And
saw
I'm
that.
reading that and I'm thinking to myself, do
That's
you
not
people know
within their
what?
perfect. Yeah.
No,
But
that's
that's the
not
whole
what,
point.
right.
I
I
really
mean,
feel like this is ridiculous.
there are city managers who have actually put high priorities on certain things like housing development or
Yeah.
whatever. But really, it's the still, let's reminder to all. It
It's the
is the
city council
job of
that
the city
sets,
council
yeah,
to determine the
set those
policies.
policies,
And it is the
right?
job of the manager to manage the departments and to execute the
Right.
policies. So it is
Right.
not the manager's job to be
They
the
make it
front
sound like he's
man.
this king that we're gonna have to
You
control
know,
his
if
powers, you know?
I think some people have a kind of a childlike view of the manager, like, oh, the
Yeah.
big bag manager, he's like such a
He's
big
not really
bad
listening.
dictator.
Yeah, he's not
That's
listening to
not
the
really
council
how
and
it
all that.
works. It's
I
never
know.
really worked that way. And
I know.
no matter how many, if people have some hurt feelings because of a bad experience or something, you know, I have my biggest concern, and I don't know how much of this is public or will be public until after it's all said and done,
Yeah.
is that how do you get from the big advertisement for anybody want to be city manager to
Mhm.
reviewing a short list of finalists, and that will be done through a screening committee. And how that process and who's on that screening committee is extremely important in this
That
process.
hasn't been defined in any of the city, in like Malin's meeting.
In the
Didn't have that?
original government operations meeting,
Yeah,
and I
that
have
she
it
had.
posted, it
Yeah.
gives like a big long list of possibilities, but
Okay.
it doesn't really say how it will be balanced or whether
Well,
it'll,
that's obviously gonna be talked about.
or not. In my
Everything
experience,
is too much out in the public now. It's gonna be brought up. It has to
in
be.
I will say, and I
No?
followed this
All
stuff pretty
right.
closely when they were doing the
Yes.
last city manager search that led to Rich Rossi,
Yes.
and then
Rich Rossi. I mean,
who followed
before
Bob Healy.
Louis.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And then the next one that led to Louis
Louis.
DiPasquale succeeding Rich Rossi, I didn't know who was on the screening committee at all until it was over.
But you have to say this is so different because those two came from within the administration, and it's been a real clear mandate. We do not want someone from within the administration. I mean,
Right, but I was,
that
but let's
all
also
corners.
remember that when Louis was
Yeah.
chosen, the three finalists were, one was Louis, and then two were
Yeah.
not from inside Cambridge.
True, but well, what about Rossi? Was he just appointed? He didn't.
No,
really
he went.
have
There
to-
was a process. I think
Well,
actually, now that I remember it, I think
No.
they had fiddled and diddled so thoroughly that they
Yeah,
reached the point where, in fact,
they didn't have outside
simply,
candidates,
that's
right?
right, they simply chose him.
Yeah,
I mean, I remember going to meetings where
Yeah.
they talked about the process and the schedule, whatever, never came to be.
but wasn't he like the next in line? I mean, wasn't he the
There is no
deputy?
next in line.
Not next in line, but wasn't he like what Lisa Peterson was?
It doesn't know that
Louis?
the deputy
No?
city manager is not the manager in waiting and has never been.
No, I know that. Well, then what was Rich Rossi? What was his position?
He was deputy city manager.
Okay, all right.
It's
so
just that as Bob Healy described Richie at one of those meetings,
Yeah.
he says, what he said, he's the best athlete in the draft,
Yeah.
or something like words to that effect. Which it was
No,
right.
I know
mean,
it's not in waiting, but he clearly could step
It
into
was-
that without a
it
whole
was
lot
it
of-
was the
yeah.
most it was always the most natural choice anyway.
Right.
And to me, I was pleased when they just picked him rather than screwed around for a long, long time, though there were people
Right.
who were very outraged by the choice because
Right.
they felt, oh, the fix was in. But
The
but
inside.
in that
Yeah.
time, at that time,
Yeah.
in that context, really,
Yeah.
it was the only logical thing to do.
Right.
Right. It
Right.
was a bit of a different
Right.
process when they were picking Louis, but
Yeah.
apparently he was so impressive even though he was the inside candidate, that even
Yeah.
the other finalists kind of knew it. One of them
Yeah.
actually backed out before it was even done.
Yeah, and his
Yeah.
background and just the budget and all
It
that.
was a
No
good,
matter what
it
you
was a
say,
perfect
it was
match.
just a
Yeah.
good pick. So
Yeah.
this is going to be a whole different.
Well,
Oh
will
boy.
it be? We don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, there are already
Well,
some people, and I think they're wrong, who
yeah.
already feel that some inside person has been chosen. I don't think that's
Really?
true. If
Hmm.
anything, my concern would be that they have decided to not even consider anybody who's an inside candidate. And to
Yeah.
me, that's very short-sighted as well. And I'm not saying they should pick an inside candidate, but they
No,
shouldn't exclude anybody.
but the whole charter up in the air thing, whether we're going to have this
Doing it
kind
in the
of government,
context
you know.
of some
Yeah.
uncertainty about the long-term future of the
And
charter
yeah.
itself is, I
Yeah.
think, kind of that would affect
Right.
an
An
applicant's
Right.
desire to pursue it vigorously or not,
Right.
potentially.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
So anyway, where that's going, who knows, right? But there is a meeting tomorrow evening,
Yeah, I'm
February
taping. I mean, I'll
16th.
watch it, but I'm also DVR. Did you
Yeah.
get my note about that? There's this joint transportation meeting held. At the
Yeah,
same time?
yeah. I'll
Well,
look
that's
into
kind
it.
of unfortunate. That's why. I mean,
Well,
don't they
we'll
look at
see.
schedules?
We'll see.
I'm
Now, there's
taping
one,
that too. but-
yeah,
No,
there's
that's a
one
Zoom
other,
meeting. That's a Zoom meeting.
yeah,
Yeah.
there was one other topic I wanted to at least mention, which was part of an ordinance committee meeting not so long ago, about, I think they sometimes refer to it as the BEUDO amendments. Basically,
Oh
it's
yeah.
building energy, I don't know,
Yeah.
reporting, something,
Yeah.
disclosure ordinance,
Yeah.
whatever, which I think they believe they already have something in place. But
Yeah.
what they wanted to do, and what stands before the council right now, though I believe it is under some legal review, is they want to change the amendment so it's not just about requiring properties above a certain size to report their energy use, but to in fact impose strict mandates on reduction by fixed dates,
Right.
down toward eventually having a net zero energy use on site. Now,
And are there fines or something associated if you don't reach
well,
those?
fines or, well, see, that's part of the question
Yeah.
is in my view, if you basically say, well, if you can't meet it, you can pay money into a fund, or
Right.
you can buy renewable energy credits, which to me is sort of an accounting workaround. But to whatever degree, it basically means that you would be required to fork over money in
This is
one
for
form or another.
commercial entities or buildings over a certain size, right?
It would
Developments
also
over a certain
apply, and I
size.
think this is where it could be potentially problematic, to
Oh, to extensive
research
renovation,
facilities, university facilities, etc.
but
And that
not
would
to,
include things like laboratories, right?
oh, I don't know
Now,
about that.
Now, to me, in my view, even if you believe altogether in net zero as a
Yeah.
goal,
Yeah.
you have to acknowledge the fact that buildings in the Northeast are not the same as buildings in Texas.
Right.
Buildings that are operating major lab facilities are not the same thing as passive little residential buildings in terms of the physical capacity to meet these standards.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's just ridiculously onerous, you're basically saying then you can't build the lab building effectively.
Yeah.
Or if you must, or feel you choose to, you have to fork over money. And then it runs into this issue about, is that a tax? And the
Mhm.
city can't just arbitrarily impose a tax without it being authorized by the state. So I think there's some real unanswered questions here.
So wait, so what was the last, what's the status? Didn't it at the
No, it's
ordinance
still,
meeting or not?
it's still ready to, it's still in process, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
But anyway, it's coming. But one of the reasons why I wanted to mention it was that there was actually one aspect of the ordinance committee meeting that I found actually really offensive, and it had to
Whoa.
do with a point where Patty Nolan
Oh,
actually, when I believe some people from MIT expressed some desire to be at the table in the drafting of
oh,
regulation,
I remember that. Yeah.
referred to them and basically drew a parallel between allowing MIT to be at the table and talking about setting regulations that would affect their ability to do labs and such,
Right. I
with
remember that.
somehow being analogous to allowing tobacco companies to come before
Really?
the legislature to write
Oh,
the rules.
I
And I
kind of
thought that
missed
was
that.
that
I
was
missed that.
horribly
Yeah.
offensive.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, I mean, I have my own personal issues with MIT because, hey, I
Right.
lost my job
Yeah.
there, right? But the
Yeah.
thing is in terms of them as a research institute and sort of
They're a
fundamentally
stakeholder.
doing
I
the
mean,
right thing,
they're involved.
they are
They're a
expert and
developer.
they know
should
an
be at the
awful
table.
lot more about building
Yeah.
management, building construction than Patty Nolan ever will in her lifetime.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
me, to have one counselor basically jumping up there in that way and likening MIT to a tobacco company was ridiculous.
Was she the only? When was this?
Well, she
at
got
a
shot
meeting?
down a bit like by Mark McGovern for that
Okay.
analogy. But,
Okay.
you know,
Good.
it was, you know, I mean, you want to be a city councilor, you know, play
Yeah.
fair, just play fair and be
Yeah.
honest. You know, that would be a big
Be
help.
reasonable.
Be
Reasonable.
reasonable. I know that's not permitted because, you know, we're so busy being idealistic and zealous
Oh,
that that
God.
reasonability just gets thrown
Yeah.
out the window sometimes.
Seriously. All right.
So anyway, so that's coming. Another item, I think it's been under discussion. We only have a minute here, but I think it's kind of an interesting question is there's this ARPA money, this more COVID relief
Right.
money.
Right.
And it was a lot of it just is basically granted to cities with no strings
I
attached.
think it was
So,
65 million. Right?
right. So some of it is pretty much, you know, already pretty much
Sure.
promised out, but
Yeah.
there is some political desire to basically to create sort of a public assistance function out of this and do direct
Okay.
payments, which they could
Yeah.
not normally do
Under
because of
the
anti-aid
aid.
amendment.
Right.
So-
Anti-aid amendment. Right.
and I think it's a good idea.
Mhm.
Establishing something like that where there's no, it's a one-time non-recurring process, though, is itself somewhat questionable. Though.
Well, we'll see where that goes. Okay.
Anyway, it looks like we're just about out of time
Yeah.
here.
So we'll see you March 1st.
Yeah, that's right. In like a lion, out like a lamb.
Okay.